okay, so John brought out a good point. A lot of understanding is cultural, isn't it? And you want to hear something interesting? What we learned in Thailand, in our Thai program, you would think people with similar languages have an advantage. So many Taiwanese will say to me, oh, it's easy for Germans to learn English because, you know, it's a similar language. And I go, no, it's not really that. It is similar, 20% similar, but that doesn't affect it. Do you know what affects learning the language? Cultural understanding. So interesting was, in Thailand, people who had, even foreigners, Westerners who had lived in Cambodia, for example, we'd have like, they've been working in Cambodia for years, you know, in aid organization, does not speak one word of Khmer, comes to Thailand and he learns Thai like at double the rate of an American from the States. You say, why? You know, because people go, well, it's similar, some words are saying, yeah, but he doesn't speak any Khmer at all, but why does he understand it? Because there's similar culture. And Chinese people come to Thailand to study Thai. Something like 70% of the vocabulary or 60% of the vocabulary is pretty similar, and yet they were some of the worst learners. The worst. Because the culture is completely different. So the similarity in the language is not that important. The important thing is the similarity in the culture. And it's really interesting, because otherwise Chinese people should be able to learn every Asian language. Like, you should go to Korea and like learn it in a day, and like Japanese, and, you know, because the words, you know, Korean vocabulary is like 80% of it is the same as Chinese. And I would study, when I was in Korea studying, I would look at a Korean word and I would say, oh, that's this Chinese word, like library in Korean is dosogwan. Dosogwan. And I would say to my teacher, oh, dusugwan. And she'd be like, no, this is a Korean word. Like, yeah, but can't you see it's the same as this Chinese? No. No. Like, but you also write it in the same Chinese characters. And she's like, no, those are Korean characters. And so they weren't any better at learning it than we were. And when they have to go take their Chinese exam to graduate university, they have to take like exam of 1,500 Chinese characters. And they study the same way we do, 5 hours a day writing characters. They take the exam and they forget everything. So it's not similar language that helps you, it's similar culture. So we talked about a lot of different things. We got cultural understanding. We have linguistic understanding, we have studying, we have native tongue, we have language acquisition. But the number one rule, the strongest, most powerful force in the universe is your ability to reason, your individuality, your ability to invent, improvise, adapt, and overcome. So when we're faced with talking, you're in a business situation and you've got to talk to someone and you don't have a common language or just a little bit of common language, should you just shut off your brain, resign yourself, you know, and go home? Okay, those of you who are teaching English here, how many times did you say to the student, the student goes on a trip, my student went on a trip, he came back, this student with a pretty high level of English came back from a trip, I said, where did you go on your trip? And he just stared at me. I said, hey, where did you go on your trip? Where did you go on your trip? And he goes, don't know how to say. Because he didn't know the exact perfect English word of how to say. And I said, well, tell me in Chinese first. And he said, O U Guan. And I go, that's a museum. But he didn't know that word. I said, but do you know the word old? He said, yes. Do you know the word see? Yes. Do you know the word things? Do you know place? Couldn't you have said, I went to a place to see the old things? Something like that, to explain, to begin to explain. You know, when I was in China and I got really, really sick and I had like this terrible diarrhea and my body was completely dehydrated and I got admitted to the hospital and the doctor said to me, what's wrong? And I didn't know how to say in Chinese diarrhea. So I said, oh, 昨天晚上我的肚子很不好，有问题。所以我去所很多次，20多次。我现在我的身体里面没有水。It's a bit graphic, right? But I didn't know how to say diarrhea. Well, what am I supposed to do? Just go, you know? And maybe he gives me penicillin or something and I die, like, you know? But when I said that, does he understand what's, he understands what's wrong. I'm describing, I went to the bathroom many times, my stomach is sick, I have no water. So we can use our brain. The most important thing you can do is don't shut off your brain. Now, I'm going to ask our Thai native speaker and Taiwanese native speaker, on your TV in your country and in the movies, is there English? I know in Taiwan you have English, like HBO and everything. And at the bottom of the screen you have? Chinese. And you know what 90% of Chinese people do? Tune out. I mean, not really, but mentally. Don't listen at all, right? You're just reading subtitles. But, okay, so what happens is, especially if in Thailand, the kids watch HBO because they like American movies, right? They tune out the soundtrack because they've just been trained to do that their whole life. They tune it out and they read the subtitles, and same thing in Taiwan. So what happens, you're doing that for a period of 20 years. And now you're an adult and you're working with foreigners and they talk to you in English, and what do? You've been trained from childhood on. You were trained when I hear English, I'll just tune out. And the example I had recently was I went in a restaurant and I said to the waitress, I go, can you give me the menu? She brings it to me, she hands it to me, and it's all in Chinese. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't read it. I know how to read Chinese. Because I'm just used to my whole life, I couldn't read Chinese. I'm just used to tuning out. As soon as I see Chinese characters, I go, oh, I can't read that. And now it's like, oh wait, no, I can read that. Give me that. Yeah. Alright, so this is what we're going to do now. I'm going to give you just a short demonstration of what it's like to be in an ALG classroom. What I'm going to ask you to do now, I'm going to speak German, and I'm going to give you a presentation. We'll pretend this is an ALG classroom to teach you German. Does anybody speak German? Perfect. Okay, John, if you need to ask questions, I want you to ask them in English. Jeremy, if you need to ask questions, you can ask them in French. You can, anything you want, Taiwanese, Chinese. You can do Thai or Teochew. And cameraman, if you want to ask questions, you can ask Chinese or Taiwanese. Okay, so you don't want to speak any more English. The main rule in the ALG classroom is we don't want you speaking the language we're learning. We don't want you to speak it until you're ready. So you're actually not allowed to ask questions even we're not allowed to speak Thai. When we ask questions, we're not allowed to speak Thai, we have to ask in English. Also, danke alle, dass Sie gekommen sind. Und heute wollte ich was von meinem Leben erzählen. Also, hier ist Italien. Und hier Sizilien. Und hier ist mein Vater und meine Mutter. Mein Vater, meine Mutter geboren. Und sie sind dann nach Amerika gegangen. Und hier ist Amerika, USA, und ich bin hier in New York geboren. Den bin ich. Die ist meine Schwester. Die ist meine Schwester. Und die ist meine Schwester. Hier ist mein Bruder, mein Vater und meine Mutter. Also das ist meine Familie. Hier bin ich. Ich habe 3 Schwestern. Sind alle älter als ich, große älter. Und mein Bruder, er ist auch älter als ich. Und der ist mein Vater und hier ist meine Mutter.